So I bought a portable GameCube on AliExpress. I've been seeing it around and I just had to know, what's the build quality like? What's inside of this thing? What's the screen like? How does it feel in the hands? And most importantly, what games come on it, if any? Well, I've got it. And you won't believe what's actually inside of this thing. This is a handheld GameCube? I'm not really sure what to call this thing. Now I do know the design of this thing is actually based off of the YOSHIDA, which is actually somewhat of a community-sourced mod. And it is exactly as it sounds. It's a handheld GameCube. Heck, if you know how to 3D print and you're really good with soldering, you could probably build one of these yourself. But not too long ago, I saw one on AliExpress, and Dr. Mod and I couldn't help ourselves. We had to order one, and we just had to find out. So, what is it like? Let's break it down, and I'll give you exactly what I think of this quirky, weird, awesome little handheld. What do the games run on? It's actually a micro SD card. Now, when I bought this thing and it was delivered, there was actually only a 32 gigabyte SD card in there, which didn't hold that many games. Truth be told, there was only a handful of games on it, and a lot of them were games that I didn't even want to play. As you can see, this thing is 3D printed. And I can say, in comparison to the handheld DREAMCAST that I showed you guys the other day, the 3D print and the paint job on this thing is much better. I'm not sure why they chose to use a high gloss paint on this. It really accents all the weird 3D print lines. If you look at this thing, there really isn't a ton of those going on. You can see it some when you're holding it, but for the most part, I think this one's printed pretty well. One of the best things about this handheld GameCube is absolutely the feel. This thing is essentially a Nintendo Wavebird controller. You guys remember the Wavebird? It's like the best controller ever created. They did a really good job of making this feel like a Wavebird with a screen in between it. Unlike the DREAMCAST here, which has 3D printed buttons and a D-pad as well, these are not 3D printed. These are real legitimate buttons, and this thumbstick does feel like a real legitimate Wavebird thumbstick. It's a little bit stiffer, but maybe it's because I have a lot of time on my Wavebird. Now, as far as the shoulder buttons go, they feel very similar to a Wavebird. The only thing that I thought was kind of weird is the fact that there are two Z buttons. If you guys remember, the Wavebird, the Nintendo GameCube controller, only had one Z button up top. And if you remember, it was a really spongy button. I really actually didn't like that button too much. This one, if you can hear, is very clicky, and I like it. But there's two of them, and there's a reason there's two of them. We're gonna get to that in just a minute. Inside of this thing is a pretty decent battery. It's a 10,000 milliamp battery that on a full charge will give you about 3.5, maybe 4 hours of playtime, which actually isn't terrible considering what modern handheld PCs like the Steam Deck and the Ally are giving you on battery life. You basically have to play those things plugged in all the time. So the battery's not bad, and it does sport an 8.5 volt charger input. And this system actually does have cooling fans, so that's kind of cool too. The one thing that this has that the portable DREAMCAST does not, this actually has a headphone jack. I found it incredibly strange that the DREAMCAST doesn't have a headphone jack. Now, there is one thing you guys did ask about the DREAMCAST that I didn't address, that I will address with this, that neither of them actually have, and that is video output. There is no video out on either of these, which is sort of weird considering what's actually inside of these things. Now with this GameCube one, you can actually sync another controller to it, which I thought was very strange, again, until I found out what was actually inside of this thing. And moving on to audio, this thing sounds pretty good. I actually think the DREAMCAST sounds good. I know some of you pointed out in the YouTube video that it sounds like total trash, but my microphone is right here. When I was playing this, I had the speakers facing the camera, so of course it's gonna sound like crap. But I can tell you, from somebody who enjoys their audio, the speakers on these things are both passable. They're not gonna blow you out of the room, but you could totally play games on them, and it sounds pretty good. Let's talk about what this thing is actually running on. If you have messed with GameCube mods in the past, the software on this thing is going to look pretty familiar. It's RV Loader. It replaces the system menus and allows you to do your own completely custom menu. And in this case, it's nothing terribly fancy, although it does give you all of the game box art, which I think is kind of cool. And now the really interesting part, what's actually inside of this thing. If you were to open this thing up and take a look, it's actually a Nintendo Wii motherboard. Somebody took the motherboard out of a Nintendo Wii, completely trimmed it down, and made it fit inside of here. That's what that original Yoshida mod was based on. So once again, just like the portable Dreamcast, everything on here is running on native hardware, which again, for me is very important. I know that some of you were gonna say, there are emulators for your PC that can run some of these games, and yes, you are right. But again, I make the point, nothing is going to run the game as well as native hardware. So I personally am a really big fan of that. Does that mean that this will play Wii games as well? Yeah, this will play Wii games as well. Unfortunately, nobody wants to sit here like this, put up a sensor bar, and use Wiimotes. So the only Wii games that I do have loaded on here are the ones that aren't motion control supported. Going back to that sync button, you actually can sync Wiimotes to this thing, because inside of here is a Nintendo Wii, which is also why it has 4 shoulder buttons. Going back to what was installed on this thing when I got it in the mail from AliExpress, there wasn't a whole lot. Again, it was a 32 gigabyte memory card, and of course, just like everything else that I own, this one has had a trip to Dr. Mod's lab, where he loaded a plethora of Nintendo GameCube games and even a handful of Nintendo Wii games that I wanted to put on here that didn't have motion controller support. And of course, the first thing I did when I got it was laid in bed and played through Eternal Darkness on a handheld. It's something I always wanted to do. Not to mention I now have handheld versions of stuff like Freedom Fighters, Wind Waker, Aggressive Inline Skate, and I would say Mario Sunshine, but we already got a better version on the Nintendo Switch last year. So basically, if it came to the GameCube, you can have it loaded up on here. And of course, since this thing is running on Wii hardware, you can load all kinds of other emulators and stuff via RetroArch as well. And there is one thing I need to do. Okay. Give it another pass. The TST, Tofer Sniff Test. I would say that this one's more 8 out of 10. It smells slightly fresher than the Dreamcast does. I just love the smell of new electronics, or in this case, new old electronics. I do think that the portable GameCube is leaps and bounds more comfortable to hold than the portable Dreamcast. Not that I actually dislike the portable Dreamcast, because as weird as it seems, it actually is okay to hold in the hands. There's just nothing better than the Nintendo Wavebird. I just think that that's by far one of the most comfortable controllers to ever have graced a video game console. And if you haven't seen the video I did on the portable Dreamcast, you can check it out right here. If you like stuff like this and you want to see more videos like this in the future, don't forget to subscribe to the channel right here.